Sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya cimnanya. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash that subscribe button, turn your notification so you are notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all so much, and I'm saying massive shout out to every one of you for the support you all showing me here with. I am grateful, and you all are super sweet. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about this video. This young lady actually opened up about Israel, Palestine, and United States, and she used 9/11, and then she also connected 9/11 to US and Israel. And then a lot of people were like, now we see why a lot of people were like, the Western media is complicit, and that is absolutely true. I mean, they lie a whole lot and they push the truth out from where it should be. And not until you are able to understand and grasp what is going on, then you can understand what is going on. Also, a lot of people that stitched the video also mentioned World Trade Center bombing that happened in 1993. I mean, let's just get into this video because this is just a whole lot coming up from them, and you definitely will love it. Let's get into it.
Like many of you, I became aware of the Palestinian and Israeli relations, or lack thereof, really starting around October 7th. Especially around October 7th, because after Hamas attacked Israel, a lot of pro-Israel people and Israelis were saying that this was Israel's version of 9/11. And I always thought it was interesting that Israel picked 9/11, right, as their similarity marker, right? And if you know anything about the US when it comes to propaganda, specifically around 9/11, a lot of the propaganda starts on 9/11 and moves forward, right? You look at a lot of the things that came post 9/11 with the Patriot Act, TSA being created, the hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians in Libya, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan that were murdered in the name of trying to defeat Al-Qaeda, all of that. But you never really hear what happened before 9/11, what led up to 9/11, right? So I did some digging, and I went to a simple Google search of 9/11 attacks, and I went on Wikipedia, and I scrolled through and I saw a list of motives that Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization that claimed responsibility for the 9/11 attacks, I saw a list of motives that they had. And you want to know what the first motive was? The US support of Israel. And I thought, that's too much of a coincidence. That's too much of a coincidence. So I looked up Osama bin Laden, who was the leader of Al-Qaeda. And Osama bin Laden had released a lot of statements and epithets and all this kind of stuff leading up to 9/11. And PBS did this amazing article where they synthesized all that information into a timeline. And in March of 1997, Osama bin Laden went on CNN, Western media, and said this, quote, "We declared jihad against the U.S. government because the U.S. government is unjust, criminal, and tyrannical. It has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous, and criminal, whether directly or through its support of the Israeli occupation." The fact that the U.S. supported Israel was enough of a motive for Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden to attack the United States on 9/11. And right now, Israel is using 9/11 as a way to say, look what America did after 9/11. We have every right to do that to innocent Palestinian people. You cannot make this up even if you tried. And it is so much easier for people to relate to other humans and other people.
Yes, 100%. Go watch that, because it reminds me of this quote by Israel Zongwil, who said, "Palestine is a country without a people. The Jews are a people without a country," which has since been watered down. It's simplified, less wordy, to accommodate the Zionist movement as a land without a people for a people without a land. So it does play into the sympathy aspect that Jews have been persecuted throughout history. And it erases the humanity of the Palestinian people by denying their existence there at all, let alone their indigeneity to the land. And Western powers became Zionists because they said, hey, actually, we don't want Jews in Europe either, so if you get out of here, we'll give you a charter to wherever. Look at the Madagascar project. Look at the Uganda project. It's been heavily discussed that being anti-Zionist does not make you anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. But what's overlooked is that there are lots of Zionist powers throughout history that are anti-Semitic because they didn't want Jewish people there. They said, okay, you want your own state? Great, because we don't want you here. And all of this framework and verbiage is highly intentional to dehumanize what's happening. That is what settler colonialism does. Just like during assimilation projects here in America, where they would send indigenous people to boarding schools or try to force people into an agrarian lifestyle. The whole framework was to kill the Indian and save the man. And it shouldn't take fighting, kicking, screaming for one human to recognize another as a fellow human being. But here we are, and it does, and that's by design. So, free Palestine.
A lot of the propaganda starts on 9/11 and moves forward, right?
She's right. A lot of the propaganda does start at 9/11 and moves forward. And what I have never been able to figure out is why no one talks about the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. And the reason why I think about that so often is because it's a memory burned in my head. I always knew since I was a very small child exactly where my mother worked. And on that day, I will never forget, I was in elementary school and a teacher came running in talking about how there was an attack at the World Trade Center. If you don't believe me, you can read about it yourself because it's still on the FBI's website. That's the FBI.gov. On that day, there was an attack and everyone involved, or at least we were told everyone involved was caught. There were 6 casualties and about 1,000 people were injured that day. I've never been able to understand how it happened twice and how we were unprepared twice. To provide a little context, one of the main reasons why my mom was okay then and was okay during 9/11 was because the day of the 93 attack, she received a call from my grandfather, may he rest in peace, and he was watching what happened on the news, called her on her landline at work, because this is before cell phones, and was like, get out of the building right now. Security was saying nothing. No one who worked for her company knew what was happening or that anything even happened. Thankfully, everyone was able to get out, and then when 9/11 happened, less than a decade later, the security for her company already knew what time it was, and they were not waiting for what anybody else had to say. But my question is, if you really sit and think about it, if everyone or at least we were told, if everyone who was involved in the 93 attack was caught, then to that creator's point, how are we so either unsure of the motives and the extent that people might go based on those motives, that would even be able to happen less than a decade later? As someone who was fearful of their own life, of their family's life, all of those things on that day, who lost a neighbor on 9/11, I constantly think about how we did not know or understand the motives of 93 that even enabled 9/11 to happen. Like, the math has never mathed on that for me. And for the record, I did not and do not support the majority of the things that transpired after 9/11, but as someone who was impacted by both attacks, I always wanted to know, how did we not get to the bottom of it?
The way that Western media contextualizes Israel and...
Now, y'all know I love to give my 2 cents on the way to work, so please watch that whole video because I think it's a really good video and it talks about something really important. What I want to talk about is slightly different but definitely related, and I think that when you ask yourself the question of why Western media not only chooses to, but is able to so successfully craft and create this narrative of Israel and a narrative of Palestine that then gets distributed and repurposed over and over and over again through different forms of media and through different media institutions. And so I think this is an important conversation to have, especially as people are going out of their way to attempt to educate themselves. Because in educating yourself, what you also have to understand is that the information that you're receiving from these major media conglomerates are not necessarily going to be the most accurate in depicting the whole story, because the Western world absolutely has a goal in mind, and that goal is to deliver a history big H history, a truth, big T truth that fits their narrative. And so when you look at the liberal political institutions that support and further this mission of the Western world, that is the college and university system. That is, like I said, the major media conglomerates that are putting out the media that we see today. Most of the media that we consume are owned by the same 5 companies. So it's like when you think about all of those institutions, not as separate independent factors, but as part of a larger system that is working together to craft and create a historical narrative, not just in this country, but globally, that supports this idea that the Western world is about the proliferation of democracy, that the Western world is just, is just going out and trying to make the world better. We're not harming people. We're just going into Iraq to try to deliver our democracy to them in the Middle East. We're helping them. Yes, we destabilize their country, but we're helping them. Like, that type of narrative, it sounds crazy. But when you can get everyone from the college professors to the political pundits, the talking heads on CNN that sit there all day and talk, when you can get everyone to get on the same page and agree that that is the narrative that you are going to push, it becomes so much harder to then find evidence to the contrary that supports the actual historical record. So not history as it is presented to you by these liberal political institutions that is often crafted and curated to fit a certain narrative, but the actual historical record, because often that big H history that we are taught is quite ahistorical. You're not actually telling. That's why they've been able to convince a whole generation of millennial and Gen Z Zionists that there was nobody in the land that we now call Israel before they got there. In 1948, you thought there was just a place of the world that was unoccupied? Come on now. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But you literally hear former Zionists, people who were raised up Zionists, talk about how, yeah, when people were telling me about Israel, nobody ever mentioned that there were people already there. Nobody ever mentioned that there were Palestinians living there already. And so I think that it is so, so, so important for people who are trying to educate themselves to recognize the narrative as it exists, which is exactly what that creator is doing in this video. She's saying these are the things that I have noticed, the little ways that they speak, because it's subtle. It's not going to be overt. These are the little ways that I hear them speak that let me know that they are trying to subconsciously get me to dehumanize the Palestinians. These are the little things that I notice that they are automatically trying to get me to associate the state of Israel with the Jewish people, so that I'm too afraid to speak about the crimes that the state of Israel is committing out of fear of sounding like I have hatred for the Jewish people, because those two things are not the same. But the Western world wants you to think they are. The big H historical narrative wants you to think that those things are one and the same, and that one cannot exist without the other, but they are not mutually exclusive. And so I just really think that, I don't know. I don't know how you go out, because I mean, even Google is part of this same problem. The search results that they're going to give you are going to pop up these major media conglomerates. But I really, really, really encourage people, and I'm happy to give some book and article recommendations, because I have done a lot of research, and especially over the last 4 weeks, about this. But I think that people need to go out of their way to find scholars and to find scholarship that exists out of this main Western media narrative. Read scholars from Palestine. Read people from the African continent. Read people from the Middle East. Don't only read American and British authors, because they have been indoctrinated in a system that even our revolutionaries, even our radicals, even our Angela Davises and Kwame Ture's and Malcolm X's and all of those people have a certain unavoidable association with these liberal political institutions that makes the content that you absorb with them have to be agreed with multiple grains of salt.
A lot of the propaganda starts on 9/11 and moves forward.
Go watch her video for full context, but I recommend listening to this lecture by Michael Parenti. It's his speech on empire and neoliberalism, where he talks exactly about what she's talking about in her video, but he does like a deep dive into it. And it's not some like 9/11 truther shit. This dude's literally talking about like U.S. foreign policy and why the U.S. aligns with far-right countries like Israel. Let's go give it a listen. Parenti's a great guy. Parenti's great.
Like many of you, I became aware of the Palestinian and Israeli.
Go back and watch the video, and before I say anything, I am no way in shape or form defending Al-Qaeda for the attacks on 9/11. That's just unexcusable, and it should have never happened. But like, the fact that they said this makes me believe that the U.S. provoked all these attacks. Like, the U.S. had to do was mind their fucking business, stay out of the Middle East, And none of these attacks, none of these Americans would have suffered. None of our taxpayer dollars would go to the U.S. military. Like the U.S. is the cause of all problems that exist in this country, and we all been knowing that. But this further proves it. And even Al Qaeda was condemning U.S. occupation in these other countries, like in Africa and Asia.
So this is all I got from the stitches, and man, I really appreciate everybody that spoke on this, because I mean it's very enlightening and all that. And then coming to where the young lady said World Trade Center bombing in 1993, I remember that Biggie Small mentioned this in one of his I think is this in Jersey, right? He mentioned something like this: time to get paid, blow up like the world, blow up like the world trade, 1994. That's how I learned about this teaching. Is talking about World Trade Center. And sincerely speaking, a lot. It's just really crazy how some people really did not know a whole lot going on all this while. The connection between Israel and United States, and how US has always been the major. Sincerely speaking, I'm not going to lie, US is a big time bully. They have been bullying people, stealing from people, taking away from people, and funding so much genocide and all that. Sincerely speaking, this is just really like, an eye-opening conversation, because sometimes I learn more from all this and all that. I mean, it's so much truth in here, and she made so many great points, if you ask me. And I would like to, if you have something else you want to add to this and all that, sincerely speaking, I am very open to learning and the rest of it. Thank you all so much for the support. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.